I would like to state at the outset that when I talk about the Chinese, I do not refer to the Chinese people. They are a fantastic nation. They are an ancient culture. They've contributed to so much in terms of human evolution and human development, and their culture is so rich. I'm referring to the Communist Party of China, the Chinese government that oppresses its own people. It's a dictatorial regime that is oppressive in nature. So it in no way reflects my views of the Chinese people. In fact, I think the Chinese people are fantastic and amazing. Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to delve into the purges currently going on in China, especially these last two generals that have become victims of this purge. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. A lot of the information that I'm going to give you today, I've managed to obtain from a really amazing channel on YouTube. So I urge you to go and check it out and subscribe. It's Lay's Real Talk, and I'll put a link up to it. It's a really great channel if you want to know what's going on within China and the CCP. Lay does a fantastic job of breaking things down, the hierarchy, the structure, the military structure, what's the political dynamic within the CCP, the infighting, who's in, who's out. It's absolutely intriguing. So I really urge you, go on to her channel, subscribe, and you will definitely not be sorry. Lei mentions that according to Taiwan's Institute of Chinese Communist Studies report, that as of the 21st of October 2025, the CCP had 35 full generals within their military structure. Now, I think that 32 of them were full-ranked military generals, while 3 of them were in an acting full general capacity. So they were junior generals but acting in a full general capacity, basically just waiting for their appointments to be approved. Now bear in mind, these don't include the 2 generals that have recently been purged.
China's most senior general is under investigation, its defense ministry said on Saturday, in what is Beijing's highest profile purge of the top brass to date. Zhang Youxia is being probed over suspected serious violation of discipline and law, the ministry said. He has not been seen in public since November, when he held talks with Russia's defense minister in Moscow. The veteran modernizer was widely seen as President Xi Jinping's closest military ally. The 75-year-old was Xi's second in command, as vice chairman of the Central Military Commission. Foreign diplomats and security analysts are watching developments closely, given Zhang's closeness to Xi. His removal may also impact the Commission's work in terms of command, as well as the People Liberation Army's ongoing military modernization and posture. The military was one of the main targets of a broad corruption crackdown ordered by Xi in 2012. 8 top generals were expelled from the ruling Communist Party on graft charges in 2025. The ministry on Saturday said Liu Zhenli, chief of staff of the Commission's Joint Staff Department, was also under investigation.
So she estimates that the total number of generals that have been affected, excluding these 2 current generals that have been affected, tantamount to something like between 69 and 71%. So that shows that there's a huge shakeup within the PLA. Now, this echoes a time in history when, prior to the Second World War, if you would remember, Joseph Stalin did something very similar. He had purged the military, he had purged the ranks, And then they were lulled into the treaty, the Molotov-von Ribbentrop treaty that was signed, where they formed a military alliance. So Stalin was basically confident that the Wehrmacht would not descend on the Soviet Union. However, much to his surprise, they launched an attack against the Soviet Union. And you find that suddenly the Soviet army has to go into battle, and it's woefully lacking in terms of leadership because Stalin has purged the leadership. So this rings a very similar bell that Xi has systematically been purging the PLA, and some of these are generals that he himself has actually appointed. These are people who he felt were loyal to him. However, I suspect that the paranoia is now beginning to set in. Now, the recent purging of these two generals, namely General Zhang Yisha and General Liu Jinli, I hope I'm pronouncing their names correctly, please forgive me if I'm not, is a really important development regarding the purging of generals within the PLA. In fact, the arrest of General Zhang Yisha is something that many would have seen as not being possible. Incidentally, the charges leveled against them are they are under investigation for serious violations of discipline and law. Now, that's extremely vague, that's like almost being charged for anything from the sun coming up in the morning all the way down to Napoleon losing the battle at Waterloo. It's insanely broad. But it helps form a narrative later on. Now, Lei goes on to give us some crucial insider information which she has ascertained from two sources, namely a Mr. Du, who is an activist exiled from mainland China, as well as a pro-democratic activist living in Canada by the name of Miss Shun. Now, bear in mind that Liz making all these remarks, these allegations, at a time when, the outside world didn't even know these things were happening. In fact, Ms. Shun had mentioned that General Zhang Yisha had been taken into custody, I think, on the 19th of January of this year. So it was well before the rumors had even begun on social media. So Ms. Shun alleges that she had received information from one of her trusted sources that resided within mainland China. And it tells a really dramatic tale. This is like something out of a spy movie or a James Bond film. Apparently, on the night of the 18th of January, Xi Jinping was meant to have been staying over at a hotel called the Jingshu Hotel. Now, this hotel is rumored to be primarily for members of the CCP's top brass. Apparently, it's not open to the public. The top brass go there and they frequent the place. So this is basically their hangout. Now, Xi Jinping on the night of the 18th was meant to have been at that hotel. Incidentally, he doesn't have a fixed address. He never spends too much time in any one place. I'm assuming for fear of assassination attempts and things like that. So I really feel sorry for the guy because, just dealing with that stress alone must be enough, let alone all the headaches coming in from all over the world, the rest of the world, as well as all the internal politics. Man, you can't even pay me enough to do the job he's doing. So apparently, General Zhang Yusha and General Liu Jinli were made aware that Xi Jinping was going to be at this hotel on the evening of the 18th. So they set up an operation whereby he was to be arrested. However, it's been alleged by Ms. Shun that 2 hours before the operation could go into effect, now there's some speculation as to whether, how Xi came into this information, but there is speculation, it's been alleged that one of the perpetrators involved in setting up this operation to apprehend him had leaked the information to him, and he quietly slipped out of the hotel without anybody knowing, but also made sure that he fortified the place on his exit so that nobody was aware that he was not there. So he set up a counter sting basically. And neither of the two generals were aware that Xi Jinping had left the hotel. Their forces subsequently arrived at the hotel, and apparently a shootout ensued where 9 of Xi Jinping's personal security team were killed and dozens of security personnel that were sent in by the generals were also taken out. Now, the operation against the two generals proceeded with lightning precision, and they were arrested immediately, and their families were also brought into detention. Apparently, Xi Jinping had suffered some severe shock as a result of this episode, and was even, his family even tried to convince him to step down because of this threat. So the question on everybody's mind was, why did General Zheng Yuxiao and General Liu Jinli embark on this audacious plan? And the other source that Lei mentions, the other activist living abroad, Mr. Du, says that General Zheng had no option but to act. Now, Lei goes in to describe how she arrived at the deduction we're going to give you. She alleges that there had been 2 attempts on General Zheng's life. One of them was in November, late November, early December, when he was visiting Russia, and there was meant to be an attempt on his life when he was in Moscow. However, he had been tipped off by a third-party country. Now, nobody knows who that country is, but suspicions arose that it could be the United States of America. And as a result of this tip-off, General Zheng then left Russia early, and he took a detour via Mongolia. He was meant to have been the victim of a plane crash. Then there was an incident that occurred in a tunnel in Beijing where there was an explosion, and it is rumored that Xi Jinping's body double had been taken out in that explosion. Now, Lei goes on to say that this dissident, Mr. Du, has also issued stark warnings to all his friends and family and people that he knows who are residing within Beijing to be careful, as it is highly expected that factions loyal to General Zheng are going to mount some sort of a retaliation, and that the areas around Tiananmen Square are particularly high-risk areas to be in at present. Lei has also been scouring the internet and in contact with people, and she's found out that also there's been sporadic power cuts in different areas in Beijing, as well as unusual military vehicle activity out on the streets. Now, General Zheng Yuxiao is no ordinary general. That's why I say that this purge is extremely significant, and that is probably why you find that there has been a frantic move to get this, to have them arrested, have their families detained, and get this matter contained, because of the possible ramifications that could arise out of this. And that is because, according to Lei, General Zheng is the son of a former head of Chairman Mao's security detail, as well as a former founding member of the PLA. So General Zheng is referred to by the term a princeling. So somebody who comes from communist royalty, basically those that fought against Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists, as well as the Japanese and the Americans and whoever else had a hand in the fight in pre-communist China. Because you got to remember, China during the Second World War was a vassal state, especially Manchuria, of the Japanese. So there were intermittent times when the communists aligned with the nationalists, then they broke off that alignment, and anyway, it's something we can look at a later stage. What happened was that the communists eventually won. They drove the nationalists out, which is where you find that the Chiang Kai-shek had fled with his entourage to Formosa, which is now referred to as Taiwan. And the Chinese Communist Party proclaimed themselves winners in the war, and that's how they unified China under the communist banner. Now, General Zheng is a son of one of those people who fought in that struggle. And incidentally, Xi Jinping is also the son of one of those people that fought under the communist banner to liberate China from Japanese rule. And interesting fact here is that Mao had Xi Jinping's father purged. General Zheng is a princeling. General Zheng has also successfully navigated a career within the PLA that has seen continuous ebb and flows and tumultuous events within the party and within the PLA, and he's managed to withstand all of that, subsequently being promoted by Hu Jintao and given the highest promotion by Xi Jinping. General Liu, on the other hand, is someone who was a very dear friend of General Zheng. In fact, he was a subordinate of General Zheng during the Sino-Vietnamese War. And that's another thing. General Zheng and General Liu are some of the few remaining generals within the PLA that have combat experience. Because if you think about it, the Chinese, since the Sino-Vietnamese War and the Korean War, have had no battle experience. They haven't been involved in any wars anywhere. So these two had earned medals and active war experience. Now, you find that General Zheng was extremely loyal to the army. And Xi Jinping required two things. He required allegiance to the army, but foremost, allegiance to him. Allegiance to the army code, but foremost, allegiance to him. And you find that because of his rhetoric and the procedures that he had been subsequently putting into place, and it's been encroaching into PLA territory, and that encroachment continuously found itself at odds with what the PLA stood for. So you have a man that's now sitting with a conscience that's heavy because it's now his allegiance to the army is in direct conflict with his allegiance to Xi Jinping as a result of the policies Xi has been putting in place as of recent times. So once again, these two generals have been arrested, and we'll leave it at that and see where it's going to head. We're going to follow this closely. So thank you for joining us on this episode, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, as it helps our channel grow and it helps us with the algorithm.